Today, the historic Shelby Post Office serves as a testament to the growth that the city of Shelby experienced as part of the textile trade at the turn of the 20th century. Prior to the construction of this $60,000 Colonial Revival building in 1916, the post office was more nomadic. It had taken up residence in the First National Bank building on 106 South Lafayette Street, the Gardner building on 102 East Warren Street, and the old Courtview Hotel on 14 West Marion Street at one time or another. The ever-growing population of the quickly progressing industrial center required a permanent structure that could handle the influx of packages. This building served as Shelby's post office for the next 50 years before being replaced by the current post office building on DeKalb Street. In that time, a 2-story annex was added to the rear of the building that also housed the law offices of former Congressman Edwin Yates Webb. After the post office moved out, the building underwent a period of being vacant and various uses such as the Uptown Annex for Cleveland County Technical Institute, today Cleveland County Community College. In 1992, the old Shelby Post Office found its next and current tenant, the Cleveland County Arts Council. Located on the north side of the Court Square next to the old City Hall, 1 East Marion Street has played a significant role in the history of Shelby. Believed to have been constructed in 1903 by Clyde R. Huey, 59th Governor of North Carolina, the structure housed the Star Publishing Company for nearly 40 years before the company moved to a new location on Warren Street. Initially, the Star Publishing Company occupied the first floor with the Ryburn and Huey law offices upstairs. With political aspirations pulling him away from the printing business, Huey hired Lee B. Weathers to be editor of the newspaper. Under Weathers' leadership, the Star Publishing Company expanded to take over the entire building. By 1918, Huey's political career had taken off and he sold the building to the Star Publishing Company. Lee B. Weathers remained editor until his death in 1958 when his son Henry Lee Weathers became editor. Following the occupancy of the Star Publishing Company was Lee's Home and Office Supply, which operated out of the building for several years. The brainchild of Lee B. Weathers, who was searching for a use for the building after moving the Star printing office, the store was initially managed and later owned by Lee F. Shuford, who continued to own and operate the business out of the building for the next 30 years. In 2009, the building was occupied by Personnel Services Unlimited, whose owner Tim Blackwell is a grandson of Shuford, bringing the history of this amazing building full circle. This building, with its modern architecture, harkens back to the rapid progress of the mid-century, making it hard to imagine hearing the creaking of wooden pews and the smell of burning candles. However, over 75 years before the current building was even a thought, the land it sits on served as the host for the second building of the Central United Methodist Church. In 1884, when the church building was constructed, Shelby didn't even have running water. Most local businesses utilized the conveniently located wells on the Court Square to service their needs. This site would go on to be occupied by the church until the current building was constructed in 1924, due to the church building being outdated and unsafe. Next came the brash sound of a Sibbald pipe organ playing a jaunty tune in the newly christened Webb Theater. The 800-seat theater was constructed by J.E. and Claude Webb and opened in February of 1925 with the slogan, "Photoplays to Please." The first film to roll on the theater's Powers 6B projector was Girl Shy, featuring silent film star Harold Lloyd. The Webb served as a fixture of the Uptown Shelby landscape until its closure in the late 1950s. In 1960, the Webb Theater property was purchased by Union Trust, which was operating in a brand new international-style building by 1962. This new building incorporated many modern styles, including concrete construction and the use of glass for exterior walls. This building served as a hallmark of an Uptown Shelby which was finding a new identity as a modern city. By the 1950s and 60s, industry was moving into Cleveland County, which caused a transfer of ideas. This brought the architecture and design of major cities into the bustling Court Square. The Union Trust building was the home of many different banking institutions, including BB&T, before finally becoming the home for Grag Financial in 2006. The building has maintained much of its original character and stands today as a remarkable example of the mid-century period in Shelby. The 1920s and 1930s saw some of the largest growth in the beauty industry. Between 1920 and 1930, the number of beauty parlors in the United States exploded from 5,000 to over 40,000. This was due in large part to the dawn of the bob and wave hairstyles, which had graced magazine covers and silver screens all across the country, leading America into a fashion frenzy. For an up-and-coming city like Shelby, the craze hit hard and fast, with new salons popping up all across the city, 3 of which were located in this building. The new Royster building, as it was known at the time, was built by S.S. Royster and his family as an addition to the original Royster building, which faces West Warren Street, in 1926. The building used plans from architect Q.E. Herman of Hickory and boasted large plate glass storefronts that offered plenty of room to display various products. The first occupant of this particular unit was a chiropractor by the name of Robert L. Ramsar, who operated in the building for only a year. Then began the nearly 25-year rotation of beauty parlors, beginning with the Francis Beauty Shop in 1927. Francis was replaced by Gravity Beauty Salon in 1929, which was again replaced by Shelby Beauty Shop, the building's longest beauty shop tenant, in 1932. Shelby Beauty Shop occupied the building until 1951, bringing an end to the era of salons at 212 South Washington Street. From 1951 until sometime in the 1980s, the building was then occupied by the Roulaine Gas Company, a propane provider. Roulaine underwent a couple of transitions, which changed the name of the business to Suburban Roulaine Gas Company, and then again to just Suburban Gas Company. Today, Suburban Gas Company still operates in Shelby, although at a separate location. For many years, the building was vacant until the Hospice Cleveland County Foundation moved its offices in 2021. Located in the block south of the Court Square, the 209 to 211 address on South Lafayette Street are representative of the earliest brick commercial buildings in Shelby. Constructed by A.C. Miller in 1905 and 1910, the buildings were part of what was known as the Miller Block, a group of brick commercial buildings on the southeast corner of Lafayette and Warren Streets. In 1920, Charles C. Blanton, George B. Blanton, and A.W. McMurray purchased the Miller Block from A.C. Miller for $90,000, the largest non-textile related transaction in the history of Shelby at that time. 3 years later, the Miller Block was sold to First National Bank of Shelby with the intention of constructing a brand new 6-story building to house the bank. Fatefully, that plan fell through, with the bank choosing to build its new building on the opposing corner. Although their original Italianate facades and storefronts were renovated during the mid-century era, the historic structures remain and continue their story. A variety of businesses have been housed in the 209 to 211 South Lafayette Street address over the years. The 209 building has been home to businesses such as a barbershop, Boss Bakery, Shelby Rubber Works, and the Sanitary Lunch. The staple City Cafe was in 211 for many years, with the upstairs being used as storage for the neighboring John M. Best Furniture Company. In recent years, Joe's Place and South Lafayette Street Grill and Pub have called 209 to 211 South Lafayette Street home, continuing its history as an appealing and appetizing place to eat. On a list of mechanical wonders that we take for granted, the elevator has to rank relatively high. Many of us ride them daily to get to work, apartments, and stores. There are roughly 250 elevators operating in Cleveland County today. Before this building was built, however, there were none. In 1911, two prominent businessmen, A.P. Weathers and C.T. Hord, erected this and an adjoining building for $8,000, a princely sum when compared against the average annual wage for a farmer, which stood at about $180 at the time. This new structure would serve as the second home for the Farmers Hardware, which had been operated by Weathers and Hord a few doors down since 1899. It achieved many firsts in Shelby at the time. First to have a glass storefront, first to have an elevator, the first 4-story building, and the first building to have sidewalk curbs. Along with all these firsts came other modern conveniences such as running water and electric lights, both of which were still relatively new to Shelby in 1911. The Farmers Hardware operated in the building until 1933, when a lease was given to A&P Tea Company, which by this time had become one of many supermarket chains operating throughout the United States. A&P stayed in the Farmers Hardware building until 1941, when it was replaced by Bluebird Ice Cream, with the remnant store following in 1945. Later in 1945, the Farmers Hardware building would find its second long-term occupant, Diana Shops. The Diana Shops in Shelby was one of nearly 50 chain stores throughout the country. The 1945 announcement of the store's opening stated that the building would be renovated with cream and pink Georgian marble, new store windows, and an air conditioning system when this equipment comes on the market. Diana greatly modernized the look of the building, giving it a facade that brought it into the post-war era. Diana Shops maintained a lease on the building for 15 years, moving out in 1960 when Merritt Shoe moved in. This location underwent a variety of different tenants for the next several years until Hats Off Salon moved into the building in 2013. This building, now occupied by Workshop Vintage Market, has been a fixture of the Uptown Shelby landscape for over 80 years. However, before this building was erected, the soil underneath it served as the setting of family fun for the people of Shelby of a bygone era. As early as 1930, this lot, which was situated between the Campbell Building on the corner of Campbell and North Lafayette Streets, and the Courtview Hotel, which stood on the corner of West Marion and North Lafayette Streets, was the site of a Tom Thumb golf course. At the time, mini golf was a new craze that was sweeping through the United States, with the Commerce Department estimating roughly 25,000 courses being set up in the 4 years since the game's inception in Lookout Mountain, Georgia in 1926. Tom Thumb Golf in Uptown Shelby would be short-lived, lasting just one season, then becoming a popular spot to shoot marbles for the local kids, with the tournament being hosted in 1932. On January 10th of 1934, the lot was again repurposed, this time as an ice skating rink. The rink, which was operated by George Hurst and Otis Godfrey, ran with the slogan, "For health's sake, learn to skate," and offered lessons for 5 to 25 cents. In 1937, the lot received a permanent tenant in the form of the building that stands currently. This building was erected by Mr. Campbell, who also designed and erected the neighboring brick storefront. The first occupant was Kester Groom Furniture Company, which remained in the building for the next 63 years until they closed in 2000. The building then underwent several tenants until 2018 when Workshop Vintage Market moved in. Due in large part to the lack of consistent sources, not much is known about the early history of this building. It is believed that it was constructed in 1907 when local businesswoman Belle Fromm and Shelby tycoon W.C. Wisnett built two buildings side by side, with Wisnett occupying this building and Fromm the adjacent one. Wisnett was a seller of clothing items and would make regular trips to large metropolitan centers such as New York and Baltimore in search of the finest fashions of the day. By 1920, Wisnett was beginning to downsize his operation, which incorporated several stores in the Uptown Shelby area. The business was purchased by a Mr. Burge, who owned stores in Gaffney, South Carolina and Atlanta, Georgia, prior to moving to Shelby. Burge renamed the store The Battery and continued to sell clothing for the next 7 years. In 1927, this building began its long run of grocery store ownership, beginning with the McKinney Market. In 1937, it changed to the City Grocery and Magnus Meat Market, which lasted for another 9 years before becoming the Hunter Grocery Store in 1946. While a number of businesses occupied the lower floor of the building, just as many occupied the upper floor. Perhaps the most notable upstairs tenant was O.M. Mull, who served 5 terms in the North Carolina House of Representatives, becoming Speaker in 1941. Mull had an office upstairs, although it is unclear exactly when. For the next several decades, the building was host to a variety of occupants, including a fine antiques dealer named Earl Meacham in 1969 and a Bible bookstore in 1982. In 2019, Halcyon Salon moved into the building, where it has remained the occupant ever since. Every once in a while, a building takes on the identity of the business that operates in it. That is the case with the building that stands here today. Built in the late 1930s, this structure began its life as an Atlantic White Flash service station, before becoming the home of Jackson and McSwain Grocers in 1938. In 1943, the building became the home of Piedmont Salvage Store, and it was soon after that its story collided with that of the family whose name now graces its facade. After a difficult childhood, Edgar Owen B. Lee first came into contact with fabric as a teenager, working in the Shelby Mill along with his father and his 6 brothers and sisters at the turn of the 20th century. By 1930, at the age of 35, Edgar left millwork behind, becoming a clerk at a local grocery store. Lee would first step into 114 West Graham Street in the mid-1940s as a salesman for Piedmont Salvage Store. He worked there for the next several years, along the way running a business out of his home selling and repairing sewing machines. In 1957, Lee was able to open his first storefront under the name E.O. Lee Sewing Shop, choosing 114 West Graham Street as the venue. For the next 5 years, Edgar was able to enjoy his dream before passing away at the age of 67. The business has carried on ever since and has grown to a total of 3 stores under the name Lee's Creative Sewing and Vacuums. If you were to look outside this building today, you may be greeted by the hustle and bustle of one of Cleveland County's busiest thoroughfares. However, over 100 years ago, South Lafayette Street was just beginning to gain a reputation as one of the bustling business centers of Shelby. At that time, where this building now stands, was a livery stable owned by W.H. Blanton, where anyone could buy a good horse and the tack necessary to ride it home. It was the corner of this building that served as the local gathering place known as Pop Corner, a name which has many origins, all based on hearsay from Shelby's older residents over a century ago. By 1915, a picture show was operating on the site as the first Princess Theater, a 1,000-seat venue owned by L.C. Beam and managed by his 2 entertainment-minded sons, Zeb and Enos. The theater saw massive success, leading the Beam brothers to construct a new theater in 1923 with a 2,400-seat capacity where the Carolina Mall stands today. They then set about working on a new building for the site of the old theater. This building, which was to serve as the new headquarters of W.L. Fanning Company department store, was to be modern in every way, with plans drawn up by J.M. McMichael of Charlotte, North Carolina. The first brick was laid on March 17, 1924, and by August, the $50,000 store was being outfitted with mahogany furnishings shipped in from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Fannings would continue to operate in this location until they were bought out in 1927 by Paragon Furniture Company. The building would change hands again in 1930, being sold to Eford's department store. Eford served as one of the longest tenants of the building, leaving in the early 1950s. After that time, the building saw a variety of merchants, with changes being made to the facade by the Myers shop in the late 20th century. Today, half of the building is operated by Excitech, and it maintains much of its original character.